What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we are going to be breaking down the Week 4 showdown slate between the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. It is a true pick'em as of this morning, recording on a Tuesday, and I think this is a very, very fun matchup between two teams that are starting out the gate pretty hot. Arizona was one close loss from San Fran away from being 3-0, and so is Seattle based on the way they have performed. Arizona took care of business against Carolina and New Orleans the first 2 weeks, whereas Seattle, the last 2 weeks since that loss to San Francisco, have really taken it to Pittsburgh, and then following that, going to beating New Orleans down by 30 in the first half and not even having to play all their guys. So it's a really true fun test. Obviously, the line is really indicating that because of the spread, the total, all that stuff. It'll be really fun, really exciting. Prices are really tough on this slate, and I was kind of disappointed, but at the same time, people are going to be looking at this contest and wanting to fade, and so the ownership's going to be pretty spread out. So in that regard, there's not a ton of chalk, so it should be a really fun slate to where there's not going to be a bunch of 80% owned guys. It's going to be probably smack dab in the middle of like 50 to 65, 70% for a lot of the guys up top, and people are going to be mixing and matching. So let's find some fun ways to get different and really kind of get into the injury concerns. Also, obviously, there's some situations we'll be breaking down. So leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of this video. We're going to be breaking down the main slate, and then on Sunday, we'll be live streaming all kinds of questions and stuff like that. If you want to tune in Sunday morning, we'll be doing that most Sundays going forward. So with all that said, let's get right into it. All right, so yeah, let's kick it off. We're going to start off with the road team. That is the Seattle Seahawks, and one guy that has been one of our mainstays and the breakout candidate, high exposed guy that we talked about last year was JSN. We'll wait on him for a second because that'll be an interesting talking point as well. But him, Cooper Kupp, you got Torrey Horton, who's been a huge, strong rookie so far. That's pretty much it in terms of receivers that are getting a ton of work. But I mean, you got AJ Barner there, you got Elijah Arroyo, got a Q tag, but that's really the five main pass catchers for this offense. It's pretty self-explanatory for the most part how they really kind of go about their offensive ways in terms of the pass game, but it all starts with this guy JSN, Jackson Smith Najigba. 3 games, all 3 games going over 20 points this far. He's been absolutely excellent, high usage target share. Even Sam Darnold didn't even have a strong game week 1, and yet 9 for 24, 23 fantasy points the following week. Pittsburgh, what we thought would be a tough matchup, but regardless, he once again went over 100 last week. Obviously, he did not hit 100, but he scored the touchdown, and on top of that, they were up by 30 way early, so left points on the board if it was a more competitive game. But he has been, as advertised, better than probably even some people expected, with him having mostly a third or early 4th round ADP for the most part throughout best ball and redraft seasons. Obviously, he is a weekly upside, top 5 upside receiver at this point. His floor, if you're going to say that he's got a 15 to 18 point floor and he's not even hitting that yet, he's a guy that really, it's hard to avoid. Price tag, obviously being 11,000 the highest on the slate, is tough, but at the same time, sometimes you just got to plug and play the guys that are going to get you there. Cooper Kupp has been a little bit of up and down. He had a big week 2 performance, 7 for 90. But that's kind of sandwiched in between 2-3 target games where he was a non-factor. And so 7,000, he's kind of by himself in terms of pass catchers. And I mean, the very volatile guy. Torrey Horton, on the other hand, it's a very interesting thing because his snap count's kind of still hovering around 50%. Last week, he even was playing with the starter, or he was playing into the 3rd and 4th quarter with the backups, and as they kind of pulled the troops after that shellacking they did against New Orleans, but really strong. I know it does say 2 touchdowns receiving, but he had a 3rd touchdown in that Seattle game, had a 95-yard touchdown via punt return, which is the longest punt return of all time in terms of Seattle's franchise history. So he had a dud week 1 where he didn't have a target, but then games where he had 9 opportunities, scored a receiving touchdown in each one, and then also, like I said, has the upside, whatever you want to call it, to be a punt returner as well for those kinds of points. So he's been awesome. Thing is, 5,800 is really high for the role that he has because he hasn't averaged more than 5 targets a game. And on top of that, back-to-back weeks where he has scored touchdowns. So maybe his ownership might be reflecting a little higher than what his snap share usage is going to be indicating. But it just kind of depends on how you feel and view them, because it's not like these guys, Elijah Arroyo and AJ Barner, at splitting reps at tight end. They're both basically 50-50 last week, but AJ Barner the first 2 weeks 85%, 89% snap share. But it's not like he's really pulling in a ton of usage. Those first 2 games where he did have a ton of snaps, 3 opportunities 1 week, 4 opportunities the next week. Obviously 2,800 is not a ton to really invest in, but he's in the pool. Elijah Arroyo was the hyped up rookie that people thought was going to go off, and only 1 target week 1, week 2, 3 targets. He caught a big pass for 31 total yards, but with that said, was only 40% of the snaps. And then the following week, even in a blowout where you think he would get more run, he did get more run in terms of snaps, but still no catches, no targets, no yards. But him being under 1,000. It's reasonable to assume you could just put him in to try to afford a bunch of guys up top. But also just worth noting and monitoring his being a limited participant as of Monday. Don't know any indications that it's going to be anything serious to where it'll affect his availability, but he's there and just worth mentioning. Running back wise, the talk of the town last week was with Zach Charbonnet missing all the practice, ending up missing the game. Kenneth Walker was my play of the week, and it was a weird game. He did punch 2 touchdowns in, but other than that, very pedestrian numbers, 50 total yards and 17 opportunities, so less than 3 yards a touch following a big old game in week 2 where he truly broke out and was very, very strong against Pittsburgh. But now, I would have thought that they would hold out Zach Charbonnet another game just because it's a short week. But full participant on Monday, that makes you think there's no Q tag. He's going to play. He's 5,400. Talking about the first 2 weeks, Zach Charbonnet actually outsnapped him 58% in week 1, 55% in week 2, whereas Kenneth Walker was 40 and 35% respectively in the first 2 weeks with them. Now, Kenneth Walker is outplaying him, especially in week 2 when Kenneth Walker had over 110 all-purpose yards, whereas Zach Charbonnet had less than 1 yard a touch. Was very, very pedestrian game in week 2. And then week 1, it wasn't much better. He did punch in 1 touchdown, but not entirely efficient. And a lot of people said that this is going to be a true split. Even Coach Speak is saying that. But if Kenneth Walker is the more explosive player, he's playing better. I don't expect him to eat a ton. But the thing is, the price gap between the two being Kenneth Walker being 10-4 and then Zach Charbonnet being all the way down at 5-4, $5,000 price difference. I don't know if we're at this point yet in the season where it is completely just going to be a one-sided affair. So if Zach Charbonnet is healthy enough to play, I would expect something along the lines of a 60-40 split one way or the other. Now, that makes it a little bit more of a riskier play for Kenneth Walker, but that just kind of keeps people's mind on Zach Charbonnet a little bit. So I don't know what his ownership's really going to be at that price, but because he's coming off a injured week, Kenneth Walker scoring 2 touchdowns, maybe people just say, okay, it's Kenneth Walker's backfield, and then he punches in a touchdown like he did in week 1, whereas Kenneth Walker did not. So one of those things, he's very affordable. And the problem is because there's so many guys up top that are so expensive that are in good spots, I don't think people are going to be living in this middle price range. Kind of similar to what we saw with the Detroit and Baltimore showdown on Monday night, where you had Amon-Ra up top, you had Lamar Jackson, obviously Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jared Goff, and that didn't count Jameson Williams being 8,000 and all these guys. And I was kind of going the mid-price route of going Sam Laporta, one of Baltimore's pass catchers, and Sam Laporta was pretty much a dud based on his price, but I was right and wrong based on going with Rashad Bateman, but it still was kind of a high-low. Charlie Kohler was like less than $1,000, and I think he was in the optimal because it allowed you to afford both Gibbs, Lamar, and then whoever else, maybe even Amon-Ra. But Amon-Ra probably didn't end up getting there, only getting 20 points, which I say only getting 20 points. That's probably going to be enough on this specific slate because I don't expect a shootout. But going to the Arizona side, it is a very interesting conversation to have, very heartbreaking conversation to have. But in terms of my own investment, one of the few plays, we didn't do a live stream this past week, but I did leave an article out of some of the plays, tournament plays and all that stuff. And that for the most part was pretty good. One of my tournament plays was Marvin Harrison because he was under 5% in a solid spot. And my first sentence was literally, and I quote, "I'm ready to be hurt again." And boy, should I listen to my own words because he had 2 critical drops. One was a blatant drop, middle of the field, had room to run. It was an underthrown ball. However, you're the former top 5 pick in a really loaded receiver class. You have to catch those things. And then ended up dropping on a free play, dropping a touchdown pass, uncontested. Was a tough catch, but at the end of the day, you got to come down with those things. So minimum, those 2 plays happen on top of what already transpired with the 3 for 44. That's over 100-yard and ideally a touchdown day if he comes down with both of those, and that's 25 plus points. And he ended up with just 7. So very heartbreaking. On top of that, he was my last leg in several parlays, and obviously that did not work out like it should have. He ended up like 6 yards short. But at the end of the day, it's a tough matchup, and he's kind of isolated by himself, being 7,800. I think because of the back-to-back duds where strangely they didn't want to target him. And I watched the Carolina game because I actually invested in him that week as well. And mostly Kyler just had off-target balls. The following week, obviously, Marvin did not have a good game whatsoever against San Francisco. And it showed. It's kind of like you called the right matchup, but just sometimes you can't expect when guys aren't going to show up and come through, because you still got to catch it. We can't catch it for them. The thing is, I believe in him and his talent to bounce back. I don't know if this is the spot, but at the same time, because that is the talk of how poorly he played, he's kind of by himself. You have at flex where it's JSN at 11, the Murray over 10, 8, really, really expensive. Kendall Walker 10-4, like I mentioned. Sam Darnold, Trey Benson we'll get into in a second. And then Trey McBride, who has been their guy for, over 2 years, essentially. The problem is just he doesn't score touchdowns. At least last week he went to go ahead and tie up the game with his fourth quarter score. Pedestrian numbers in terms of receptions and yards, but he's been a floor 12-plus point tight end for a long time now. We like him. Him being 9-8 against Seattle, good matchup. Scored last time he played them as well, and it's rare. But if that's the kind of trend that you want to follow, just say that he's going to be in our player pool for sure this week. Not necessarily a must at the price for 9,800 tight end. I mean, it's just that's as safe as it gets sometimes. But like I said, with Marvin, I think a lot of people are going to go high-low. So he's not really going to be in many people's lines. So it's just worth mentioning. A lot of times you just invest in the guys that are coming up at performances, believing and betting in the talent. Monday is a prime example where Mark Andrews, through 2 games, had 2 catches, less than 20 yards, complete non-factor without Isaiah Likely in the lineup. And then nobody was playing him in the Monday-only showdown against Detroit, and he ends up catching 2 touchdowns. Optimal line obviously goes off in berserk out of nowhere because, of course, that's how the NFL works sometimes. Marvin at some point is going to be one of those buy low for low 5K on main slate that goes for 102 touchdowns. It's going to happen at some point. I don't know if this is the matchup, but it is just worth noting. I feel like a lot of people are going to be off of that price because of the awkwardness of the lineup build, and on top of that, because of the poor performance. Meanwhile, Zay Jones, wanted to get into him because he suffered a concussion on Sunday. So very rarely do you nowadays in today's era play the following week suffering a concussion. If you're even on a short week, I know they haven't ruled him out yet. It's only Tuesday as of this recording, but I'm going to say that he's going to be out. And if that's the case, he had 47% of the snaps week 1, week 2, week 3, just about 50%. So there's snaps to be had. And with that said, that just kind of opens up more opportunity for Michael Wilson. He's had about 75% of the snaps, but again, 1 catch for 5 yards in 2 of the 3 games. And then his other game, he had 1 catch as well, but he scored. So a little bit more opportunity there. Greg Dortch, different type of receiver that Zay Jones plays. But at the same time, we've seen Greg Dortch go off, and I know Dusty is going to be very, very happy with me mentioning his name. But each of the last 3 games, his snap share has increased a little bit by a little bit. So I would anticipate if and when Zay Jones misses that they find a way to put him in 3 receiver sets the majority of the time, or at least half the time, which I know they are one of the – I don't believe that they're one of the higher rates in terms of 3 receiver sets in the NFL. The problem is that these guys are all dart throws. Say he misses, I don't have a dog in the fight between Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. If you listen to Dusty, our fellow GTD co-host, obviously he's going to go with Greg Dortch for the vibes. They're both going to project probably about 6 points. Somebody might go for 8. Somebody might go for 2. Don't know which one that is. I might sprinkle a little bit of both. And then the running back situation for Arizona is an interesting thing because James Conner, who has been their bell cow for the last recent couple of years, they actually have him all the way down at 200 now. But yeah, James Conner broke his ankle on Sunday. Unfortunate, devastating injury. It kind of the moans and groans as soon as it happened just made me feel like it was immediately serious. And he is a very durable and plays through injuries all the time. But he is officially out for the year. And now it is Trey Benson season, who was one of the first running backs taken in the 2024 draft. Obviously a dud rookie year, but he's playing behind James Conner and a guy that usually misses, 2 to 3 to 4 games a year. Didn't miss any, and he was just very limited because he just was not that great last year. But this year, very steady, kind of affecting games with kind of splash plays, which you kind of wanted to see. 8.5, 8.4, 8.1, very, very just steady so far in his limited role. But he did have a breakaway 52-yard run to kind of help salvage that little point. And then the following week, 6 targets, which you want to see. But then last week was the telltale because obviously James Conner down for the year. But most of the snaps went directly to Trey Benson right after that. And I'm kind of interested to see how the first game, how they really bring him out. If they're just going to give him all the workload, kind of similar to what James Conner, they really wanted to give him a lot of important touches. Or if Amari DiMercado or Bam Knight, who's been a healthy scratch through the first couple of weeks, gets a little bit of a run to where, maybe it's 60% of the opportunities for Trey, and then the other two split the other 40%. Or if it's just going to be Trey, this is your show now and let's go. But it is worth telling, like I believe his total yard prop is 88.5 right now. Very high. His fantasy point projection via Prize Picks, which is PPR related, similar to what DK is, 15.5. Really, really high. So Vegas thinks this is the Trey Benson show. I mean, Seattle is just kind of bottom 10 so far. His small sample size only through 3 weeks, but Trey Benson is the value of the studs this week, being only 8,800. So he is in the player pool. But Amari DiMercado, if you think he's going to get some run, 3,800, pretty reasonable, same matchup. And then, like I said, Bam Knight, if you think he'll get 5, 6, 7 snaps and he gets a target or two, because he's done that before. We've played him on showdowns for minimum price and it's worked out in the past. So all you need for $200 in a slate where there's a lot of interesting names up top that are expensive, a 200 punt is not out of the realm of possibility. If you want to look at RotoWire, take their projection roster percentage with a grain of salt, but they're usually pretty solid with projections and expectations of fantasy projections. But right now they have Bam Knight, highest value, only 1.4 fantasy points. But at the same time, that is by far the highest value on the slate, and that allows you to get up to other names like we mentioned. So I just want to bring that up in discussion because all of those guys I think are in the player pool to me. Very limited down low overall. It just kind of depends on how you want to go about this game. But I'm very interested to see because this just sounds like a fun game where the ownership is going to be really spread out, and I'm excited to see what happens. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to be going through some of our predictions, must plays, fades, contrarian plays, all that fun stuff, and then give you our, first looks. We'll start building in a second. In terms of must play, I think we're both on the same page with this one. JSN, we mentioned earlier, 11K, but 20 points every single week so far this season. He would have gone over 100 yards each week. He's just as safe as they come. He's projecting fantastically right now. I just kind of want to plug and play him. Not saying he's a must at the captain, but if I'm building 3 lines like I typically do on showdowns, I think he's going to be 3 for 3, whether that's in the flex or at captain. Emery feels the same exact way. Fades wise, it's not necessarily a difference of opinion. It's kind of the same, but different thoughts. It's really tough up top because you have to fade multiple of these guys. I didn't expect prices to be so expensive, but like I said, that just is what's going to keep ownership down. My fade of this slate specifically is going to be Kyler Murray at 10,800. And the reason behind it is just those ceiling performances that we used to see and know and love with him are coming far and few in between now. I mean, kind of inconsistent this year. He's played fine, but just the ceiling's not there. He's been under 19 fantasy points through 3 games. Sometimes it's mind-numbing decisions in the red zone. Namely the Carolina game where he just kind of chucks one up to avoid getting hit, and it's just a junior high-esque interception that ends up putting Carolina back in an opportunity to where they eventually have the ball with the opportunity to come back and win the game from being down 3 possessions in the fourth quarter. And it all started from that very play. Most of the season last year and then into this year, it's been under 20 points, kind of a lot of duds where you're seeing floors of like 11. So the floor isn't there as much as we've seen it before. And if Marvin Harrison's kind of on a dud kind of slide right now, like other if unless he just runs in for a touchdown, which is obviously a reasonable thing, I just don't really think he gets there on this slate. But at the same time, even though there's a lot of fun names, if all the quarterbacks are involved in all the touchdowns, then you're going to need at least one, possibly both. But the pairing of him and others, it just makes it really tough. And I just don't like builds going the route of Kyler. Emery's, on the other hand, is going to be the other quarterback, Sam Darnold. 10,000, again, similar to what Kyler is. That's just really expensive. Fades are tough, but I think basically the premise of what we're kind of getting without speaking to one another is 2 quarterback build might not be the play this week based on the price. You have to combine, if you're not including one at captain, spend $20,800 for 2 quarterbacks that have not really hit 20-point floors, at least in this season so far. So with that said, that I think even though we're on different sides in terms of who we're fading, I think the premise or precipice of that is we're kind of lockstep. Tournament plays, similar prices, but different guys. I'm actually going Seattle defense. Obviously, they spanked New Orleans through 3 weeks. 16 points, 14 points, 8 points, 2 special teams / defensive touchdowns thus far. The number 2 scoring defense in terms of points allowed, have not allowed more than 17 points so far this year. They're really impressing me. They're creating some sacks recent weeks, and on top of that, turnovers as well. So they had 2 picks in the first 2 weeks and then 1 last week. So I just think that's a very interesting way to go about things, is that based on their performance so far, I just think that 4,000 is just really, really cheap for a showdown slate that has a lot of unknown options. And it's not like this point total is really high. It's 43 right now. So they're basically saying it's going to be a 21-20 game. And say Arizona struggles even more because Marvin's not getting there, James Conner's now out, and Trey Benson's not getting the job done, and they're held to 2 touchdowns or less, Seattle can definitely get there for 8 to 10 points at that price point. Emery's contrarian play of the slate is going to be Amari DiMercato. We mentioned him, $3,800, and it's kind of essentially the role of James Conner's out, and they were already going to 60-40 split, so I don't anticipate they're just going to give immediately all the workload to just one guy. So Amari DiMercato should fizzle in and get some of his reasonable price, and projecting pretty solid, about 6.5 fantasy points. So definitely room for more, and I think it's a pretty safe play down low. I think all of those guys basically in the 3K range, whether it's Dortch, Michael Wilson, Amari DiMercato, all Arizona Cardinals, somebody of that range is going to do well. Just don't know who that is, but I completely understand where he's coming from in that regard. And then game script, kind of similar as well for us too. I actually had Seattle 40. I actually picked Seattle on the road to sneak away with one, 24-20. Basically starting to become a little bit of a believer in them becoming a wild card contender. I know they had an easy start to their schedule. They're 2-1 so far, but they're very well balanced. Number 2 defense, like I mentioned, via scoring so far. And Arizona, it's so frustrating to watch and hard to trust their offense to produce. Offense becomes stagnant, predictable, and they're not great in the red zone as well. I can see Seattle holding them below 20, but it's not even out of the realm of possibility that they could hold them to 13 or less, which is a kind of the mark that you want to see for a defense, because obviously you have minimum 4 points from allowing 7 to 13 points, and then whatever stat you add on top of that. Usually that's the sweet spot to get at least 10, and then it's a very strong performance from there. So I just trust Seattle to convert touchdowns more so than Arizona. If that's going to be the case and it's just going to be a lower scoring game, I just feel better about Seattle and where they're heading right now as in comparison to Arizona. And then with same kind of similar thing. He actually picked the under, but 23-17 is his final. Just really close teams. We had all of these guys right in the middle of our power rankings to start the year, and I think, like he said, one is trending up, the other one is not. JSN target share, safe as can be. But it's a tough slate to build. You can go anywhere. He actually thinks the 20 max is a solid way to play. JSN, lock, everyone should kind of be shuffled. I don't know if I can go as far to say that this is a zero quarterback kind of game, but if you truly just hate both teams and it's just going to be an ugly 16-13 kind of game, like that can get you there as well. So if you're going to go double running back and just figure out the rest, that's definitely on the board as well. Props of the night. I'm going to go with AJ Barner over 16.5 receiving yards. Not only is Elijah Arroyo banged up, but AJ Barner in competitive games thus far, we saw him with a 85 and 88% snap share respectively, caught a touchdown week 2. Each of the last 2 weeks, he's gone over 20 yards. He only got there with 1 and 2 catches, so that makes it a little bit nerve-wracking, but props aren't really great right now. And this is the early part of the week where it's not like anything's used too much yet, but nothing was really sticking out. I've kind of been nailing the tight ends on the slates in terms of props. Last week was Dalton Kincaid. The week before it was Tucker Kraft. So I'm just going to run it back one more time and say one of the starting tight ends is going to hit his over. Emery is going to be taking one from his tournament plays and go with Amari DiMercato over 13.5 rushing yards. Completely understand it. Obviously, he has 0 yards thus far this year, but it's just one of those things where it's a really low prop for somebody that should have at least 25 to 30% of the touches, I would anticipate. And if you want to just insert Trey Benson in his role through 3 weeks thus far, having 69 rush yards, 14 rush yards, and completely splitting the field with Connor, and then last week having 42 on 10 touches. So if Amari DiMercato gets 5 attempts, which is completely on the board, it should be pretty easy to get there, I would say. So we're going with 2 different guys that are very low props, very volatile, but hopefully they can just knock it out and not make us sweat throughout the game. So jumping back over, we're going to go ahead and start off making some lines. I'm going to start off building Emery's line. Last week I had a little bit of an error because I was looking at 2 different lines at the same time, and basically both of our lines were similar and had the same price remainder, and I was looking at 2 different things. So this is going to be his first look. He's going to go with the safest play as the captain as well. And then he's going to insert a lot of running backs. But we're going to start out with Trey McBride, another safe guy, a number 1 option for Arizona in terms of their pass catchers. And then the other Trey in that offense for Arizona, Trey Benson, 8,800. We told you how high the props are for Vegas, so he really feels good about them. And then the last 3 in, he's going to also stack Trey Benson with Amari DiMercato. I think that's a fun way to go and be different. And then finish it off, he's going to have Josh Myers in there. Obviously, he predicted 3 field goals as a 23-point team. So if they score 3 field goals, that field goal kicker is probably going to be the optimal line. And then he's going to leave some salary on the table. Instead of going with Torrey Horton, who has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, he's going to go and save some money. Zach Charbonnet, if I'm being honest, he is too cheap based on his role. He's had 12 touches in week 1, 15 in week 2. And if they are truly going to say this is a split and say Charbonnet kind of flips and now he's the 1B in this offense, I mean, he should get 10 touches. And he's shown some pass catch upside in the past as well. So $5,400. I just don't, even though I love Kenneth Walker, I'm going to be playing some Kenneth Walker on the slate. I don't think the price gap should be $5,000. So that is his first look, and I think it's a fun one. Obviously very different because of the fact that you got both Arizona running backs, and then the backup running back, I think Kenneth Walker probably will be rivaling Benson being the second or first highest owned. And so Charbonnet, DiMercato, Benson, and then on top of that, no quarterback is very different, leaving salary on the table. Very fun. With mine, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to build a little bit more balanced with my first look. So I'm going to put JSN at the flex, but I'm going to ride with Trey Benson being my captain just because I think he's the best value of all the guys up top. Really tough to convince myself other than a JSN confident captain, but I think he's a guy that fits the mold and build. So let's see how much and what we can do. I'm going to try to click both of those names, and then we're going to go all the way down. And my guy of my receiving prop, I'm actually going to go with AJ Barner. And then that leaves you just enough for Dustin's favorite player, Mr. Greg Dortch. 0 remainder. It is a 3-3 build. Very interesting, but it is correlated a little bit. I think it's fun. I usually don't love doing captains of the losing team, but if he is a true workhorse, he's under 9,000. He's going to be at a discount. And I think he might be one of the higher owned players as well, but I I would anticipate he not being one of the 2 or 3 highest owned captains. I think people will try to squeeze in a quarterback or JSN in one of those slots instead of Trey Benson, but that remains to be seen. But let's get a little different. I also want to build based on one of my tournament plays, which is the Seahawks defense, clicking them in because, like I said, with the start they've had this year, at least 8 points every single week, two special teams touchdowns, not allowing over 17 points, and Arizona doesn't really give you the offensive upside to where I'm in fear of them just shooting out. $4,000 I think is reasonable. Once again, I'm going to throw Jason in the flex. I'm going to put Sam Darnold. I just kind of like stacking if I'm able to do so. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and go Jason at captain and see how crazy we can get. But I'm going to have a hard time getting away from Trey McBride. I will say that. But with that said, $900 remainder. That's going to be very tough. If Elijah Royal plays, 5.1 will get you there for less than $1,000. These other two scores probably won't. I would anticipate he's going to play. He was limited due to a groin injury, but he still played 30 snaps. So I don't really have too many concerns. I did say Bam Knight at minimum price, but Michael Carter, just because last year he was taking a lot of the pass catch work away from Trey Benson as a rookie when he was healthy. So with that said, if he's the guy that's active and Bam Knight is not, everything applies for a minimum price guy if you're going to go that low to be able to afford one of these captains. Like I think that is completely on the board as well. I'm intrigued by a kicker captain. I think that's been a very interesting and profitable strat so far in these showdown slates. We've mentioned before Dusty taking down in the first contest of the year with a double kicker, one and captain kind of line. But I am on the board with assuming Jason Myers can get there. I mean, at least 8 points every single week. He had 3 field goals last week. He's had multiple 50-yard field goals so far as well. And then meanwhile, you have, just for what it's worth, Chad Ryland also having a pretty strong performance so far this year as well. Because they're not the sexiest names, a lot of these recent kickers in big contests, the Harrison Butker, the Jake Bates, the Brendan Aubrey, and all that stuff, a lot of people like playing the names, and so they might be a little higher on because Jason Myers and Chad Ryland aren't really big names. I don't anticipate they're going to be overly popular, but usually kickers are pretty good leverage. So mid-price captain, let's see what we can do. Once again, I'm just going to click those names. I'm going to put Kenneth Walker in on this time. Say that this is a no quarterback build, so I'm going to go double expensive running back. And I'm also going to put in Trey McBride as to save floor. That leaves you $2,500 just because I don't love playing these guys with mid-tier captains, especially if I'm going to go kicker captain. But I don't mind picking one of these guys. Let's say it's Greg Dortch again, just for Dusty, make him happy. That's 9,000 remainder. I told you Marvin Harrison, don't love him as a play, but I'm telling you, nobody's going to play him. So 1 out of 3 lineups probably is going to get you overweight for Marvin Harrison just because it's just a weird build with and without him. I don't think 1,300 is enough to get to Trey Benson, but we're going to try just for shits and giggles. Nope, we are short. So we're going to have to find elsewhere to get different. If you wanted to immediately take Marvin Harrison out, Trey McBride in over Kenneth Walker, you can certainly do that. That's going to leave you a lot of Arizona players. Don't really love that, but just worth noting. I also think a kicker and a defense are on tap as well. So if you wanted to go, let's say Seattle defense, and they not only shut down, but they also make their field goals. So that'll probably leave you some room to do some things. Let's do a Kenneth Walker captain just because I think that's the slightly better matchup. 600 save a little bit, but that's 4 Seattle players, so we're going to have to find some Arizona love as well. Let's put in Amari DiMercado. That's enough for Sam Darnold. Go down to Trey McBride, get a little different. That leaves enough. I mean, you can leave some table. If you go expensive captain, I'm always down to leave salary on the table. But if you don't like Jason Myers, you'd rather have Zach Charbonnet double running back with kind of similar to what Emory did when he did double running back for Arizona. Actually going double running back for Seattle, I think is in play as well. So doing something like that, I think is on the board. And then having the Contrarian being the tournament play for Amari, that actually is probably one of the better lines, I would say. If you're going to say no quarterbacks, you have the floor of Kenneth Walker. You're different because I would anticipate, like I said, Trey Benson being one of the more higher owned guys. And then Amari playing his backup. We love JSN. My tournament play, Amari is Emery's tournament play. Zach Charbonnet, very reasonably priced. Trey McBride, really hard to just not love that floor. I think that's on the board. And then if you hate that and you just want to go 5-1 build, Sam Darnold right there. Very easy to pivot. Is there a way? I just want to get weird because there are a lot of expensive options. It's not really like I hate anybody up top. I say Kyler as my fade, but he could score 20 and that could get you there. It's just, it doesn't make me feel good. But let's try to do a really cheap captain. Let's go Dortch at captain, right? Let's try to put in Kyler and see what happens. So we get our 3 big names in. We put in Trey Benson as well. That's 4,800. That's enough for Chad Ryland if you want to go that route. So that is a 5-1 Arizona build. That's probably a little rich for my loving. Try to find a little bit ways of getting different. Maybe instead of Kyler Murray, you want to go down because you can also stack him with Jackson Smith-Njigba. That's enough for, instead of Kenneth Walker, you go with Zach Charbonnet. You can go Jason Myers, leave some salary on the table. Basically, the main thing is I think Jason just needs to be in your lines. I'm going to probably build 2 or 3, and he's going to be in both. Probably captain in one of them. Trey McBride, I'm going to try. He's probably going to be a tiebreaker pick for me. Trey Benson, it's hard to not feel good about him, but just know everybody else is as well. We'll see if there's any other additional news that comes out. But that is all we got for this slate. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already and you want to continue listening and interacting with us for our content. Be on the lookout for our Friday reveal for our first look for the week 4. It's actually an 11 gamer, which is kind of what you want to see in the sweet spot of the 10 to 12 games. So should be fun, should be exciting. I think the chalk is going away, so it's kind of going to be more spread out ownership, as is this Showdown slate. So a lot of fun, unique ways to build. And even if you don't feel confident, just know the most profitable slates sometimes are the ones that you don't feel the best about. So play all the time is what I recommend. Don't overdo it. Just play every week and see what you can do, because you never know when that takedown is going to happen. You can be confident there can be an injury go down. CeeDee Lamb going down in 80% of my lines obviously killed my day on Sunday. So it's one of those things where you can feel great about it. You just don't know. It's football. It happens. But we love slates like this. We love games like this. It should be fun, entertaining divisional rivalry. And I'm excited to see what happens. So that said, we will catch you on the next one.